Humans of the cardboard, we have a very, very fun, exciting discussion video to get to today. Listen, Duelist pack, Duelist of Explosion has been announced. Actually got announced a couple, like almost 2 weeks ago in the OCG. Just very exciting because honestly, I was not 100% sure that they were going to keep going with the Duelist packs. And here we are. We do get a fire one, which is one that maybe not has a ton of options, but had a couple of options that desperately were praying for there to be a fire legendary duelist, and here we are. So today we're talking specifically about VOLCANICs. I think the VOLCANICs specifically have the highest chance. Like, I think if Vegas cared enough about Yu-Gi-Oh! And they were to say, like, they were going to set lines on like which archetypes were most likely to end up in legendary duelist, I think it might be like have the highest % chance to end up in here. I really hope it does. I hope Konami doesn't whiff on this, because then, like, I mean, then it would just be sad, because as long as it's been that VOLCANICs haven't gotten support, like, this would be the ultimate, like, spit in the face meme for pain that, like, that they still wouldn't even end up in the fire legendary duelist. They have a duelist that's relevant enough. They're an archetype that needs support bad. 7 cards would be so huge here. So let's get into them. We're going to talk about the cards that they have now and, like, what kind of is going on there and like what could potentially come up with support, because, you know, with anything, even though it's 7 cards, we know it's a duelist pack, so it might have some anime aspects to it that aren't quite as fully competitive as we might want, but the better the archetype already is, or the better kind of just start the archetype already has going to kind of set up so that the support just needs to be support and not rewrite the whole archetype, the better. And then I'm also going to throw out some generic options that could be cards that come up depending on what direction they take this new support. So let's get into it. Starting off here, of course, Volcanic Rocket. This seems to be the only starter card the deck has at the moment. When this card is summoned, it adds a Blaze Accelerator card from deck or graveyard to your hand. I love that this is deck or graveyard. It means we might not have to play 3 copies of regular Blaze Accelerator, which is nice. I also like that this is just, by the way, summoned. Not normal summoned. Summoned. So if we theoretically get any kind of support that just like special a volcanic monster straight from the deck, you summon this guy, and as long as it's worded, the effect is worded the right way, he will trigger. He is a when effect, not an if, so that's something to keep in mind. But there you go, still gets you the search. So very cool, decent stat line. I think this is probably one that will translate most likely into the new support pretty well. Should be playable. From there we move to Volcanic Shell. I also think this card translates pretty well into future support because it's so open-ended. Once per turn, pay 500 to add a Volcanic Shell from deck to hand. This card just needs to be in grave. Just literally get this to grave and it's going to get another card back in your hand. It's almost, I don't know. It's essentially, to me, kind of like Destiny Hero Malicious, but just like way worse, right? Doesn't put a body on the field, but it does just advantage after advantage. You get the new one, if that you can get that one into grave, boom. This is not a once per turn. Just get another one. And just keeps replenishing hella resources. I'm assuming this card will be relevant here. Although I don't love that it kind of forces, kind of like Malicious, forces you to play it as a 3 of, but also doesn't seem to be a card you want to draw that much at all. If you could get it into grave without drawing it, that would be ideal. We'll see what happens with that. Scattershot, the penultimate meta warping card. This card is such a powerhouse in the meta. It's so good. Not really. It's just a time card for tier limit, pretty much. So I can mill it and just win in time. But yeah, this card, when it's sent to graveyard, inflicts 500 to the opponent. But if it was sent by a Blaze Accelerator card, you can send 2 more Scattershots from hand or deck to grave to destroy all monsters your opponent controls. That makes this card a lot more interesting. The prospect of burning your opponent for 1,500 total and wiping all monsters off their field seems pretty dang good. So we'll see what happens here. Again, similar vibes to Volcanic Shell. It's a card that I think seems, I mean, assuming the new support gets us consistently to a good Blaze Accelerator type card that like kind of wants you to play 3 so you can get that big effect to wipe your opponent's board, but also not a card you really want to draw. So kind of some weird dynamics going on there. From there we look at the boss monster. So these 3 seem to be the most playable monster cards here that could translate over into an actual archetype. I didn't even throw the other one in here. Don't even remember what its name is, but it stinks. It's so bad. So yeah, then we move to the boss monsters. We have Volcanic, Doomfire, and Queen. Queen is just like a bad kaiju. You kaiju, but you have the same restriction that Lava Golem has, except it's just like way weaker and it still locks you out of like normal summoning or setting, which this deck appears like it will still be very reliant on the normal. So I doubt this card will be worth it. That being said, to stay somewhat in line with the anime, because that's kind of how they like to do it, they like to make these archetypes better while still being somewhat true to the anime, I definitely see them retraining both of these. If not, at least Doomfire, because Doomfire is the main boss monster of the archetype, but he's just not good at all. He's quite terrible, actually. I could see them doing almost like a, maybe even like a fusion, where like this guy needs to summon himself from hand by sending a Tri-Blaze Accelerator to grave. What if you just had a fusion where like, kind of like this same effect, you could kind of just cheat it out by sending a Blaze Accelerator from field to grave. So just getting the Blaze Accelerator gets you to a boss monster. That could help a lot, especially if the monster has a worthwhile payoff. We'll see. It could be good for the engine. It could be a legit interruption power card there. But that could be something that still makes sense, but still modernizes the deck. You don't have to play the brick. You don't have to, you know, just getting to a Blaze Accelerator kind of just like makes a play. Definitely could set the deck up for some good stuff. So I would not be surprised, and I would actually like to see a retrain, maybe even a both, but at least Doomfire, hopefully extra deck versions. But even if they're main deck versions, they could still be good. They would just need the right cards that way we can get to them consistently when we need them, that kind of stuff. As long as we are able to make that work, then that could be cool. Into the spell cards. Blaze Accelerator. This card pitches a Pyro from hand with 500 or less attack to destroy a monster on the field. Not in once per turn, by the way. You just can't attack the turn you do. Still not a terrible card, all things considered, especially with like Volcanic Shell. Being able to like literally just like technically pop 3 cards, 3 monsters on the field is pretty good for only taking like 2 cards in hand and not needing a normal technically, unless you had to get it off of Rocket. But this card is still pretty interesting. Still like this card. I actually don't. I don't know. But hopefully we don't need to play this at 3. We'll see what happens. We'll talk about more on that in just a second here. Moving to the next card, Tri-Blaze Accelerator. So we saw Volcanic Doomfire and the fact that he has to send a face-up Tri-Blaze to grave, not just Blaze, but Tri-Blaze is just literally Blaze. I mean, it's so ever slightly better once it's on the field, but you have to send a Blaze Accelerator to grave just to activate this. So, like, you just have to go neg to put this card up, and it's just the same thing as Blaze Accelerator. So, the only way I really see us playing this card is if Konami really goes out of their way to make sure the new support forces you to play it. Like I said, what if we got a Contact Fusion monster, but we have to send a Tri-Blaze to grave, not just any Blaze, Tri-Blaze. So it forces you to play it if you want to get to your boss monster. I really hope it doesn't, because it almost reads exact. It's like slightly better. It can pitch any Pyro monster instead of one that's 500 or less attack. Other than that, it's like almost exactly the same. It's really laughable, but we'll see. It still could come up. I hope it doesn't. And the last spell here is Wildfire. Pay 500, destroy all Blaze Accelerator cards you control, and if you do, destroy as many monsters on the field as possible, just all monsters, then special summon a Wildfire token in attack position. Your monsters cannot attack the turn you use this effect. Pretty good card, honestly. I could see this coming up. Again, if I don't know, if the deck gets really consistent and we get extra cards that just make it so easy. We like so easily grab Blaze Accelerator. It's super free. It's super easy to do that. Then I could see Wildfire just being a staple in the deck. It's a quick play, so it's a good interruption. It's a pretty powerful interruption. It's a pretty powerful card even playing second into boards that aren't like, you know what I mean, super resistant to like destruction removal. I could see this card being pretty interesting for sure. And you get the token at the end, so you do get like something, you know, at the last second to like kind of give you a little bit of worthwhile. I think this card's pretty interesting. I would also love to see it end up be searchable. Like, oh, this card can add any Blaze Accelerator or card that lists it in its text. Boom, Wildfire searchable. That could be cool. I think this card's pretty interesting for sure. Could end up being playable. And the last card of any relevance is Blaze Accelerator reload. This card's name becomes Blaze Accelerator, Tri-Blaze, sorry, while it's in the spell and trap zone. During either player's main phase, you can send a volcanic card from your hand to the graveyard, and if you do, draw one card. You can only use this effect once per turn. Also, during either player's main phase, you can banish this card from the grave to send a volcanic card from deck to grave. That's also really nice because that's just a quick effect. So even just getting this to grave allows you to quick send Scattershot, and then Scattershot do his thing to board wipe. So just getting this in grave with 3 Scattershots in your deck or hand is a board wipe, which is actually pretty nice. So, you know, there's some utility here. Also counts as Tri-Blaze, so that could be something relevant. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more cards that count as Blaze Accelerator either on the field or in the graveyard, because there seems to be so much intertwined with it. We'll see. We'll see how they go about it. Whether it's more spells and traps, whether it's a monster that counts as Blaze Accelerator, I'm not exactly sure, but it's very interesting, and I'm curious to see where Konami goes with it. So that's all the basic stuff that the Volcanics already have. For the most part, I mean, I think this card translates pretty well. It even makes like Foolish Burial Goods potentially really good in the deck. Wildfire could potentially be crazy if the support still makes it worth it. This card I hate, and I really hope they don't make it a must play in the deck. But then you have your Blaze Accelerator, still actually holds up, not too terribly. These cards are terrible. We need new boss monsters, and then the other 3 are like fine. One other thing I want to note is with Shell and Scattershot, because, like I said, we have to kind of play them at 3. I almost hope this deck gets Link support, because none of the levels are really the same, so, like, Exceed doesn't make sense, plus we have no tuners in the deck, so we just have to come out of nowhere with tuners, so Synchro doesn't really fully make sense. To me, Link makes the most sense, and they would need low Links. I know it's stupid, and I hear you, but, like, Link 1? Like, that way we could, like, even just opening Scattershot or Shell, we're able to just go, like, normal summon Shell, link it off for a Link 1 that maybe gets us Blaze Accelerator, and then from there, Shell searching another Shell. So even just opening Shell is helping you pop 2 monsters going second. I don't know. I'm just opening the door, and kind of same thing for Scattershot. If you have to play it as a 3 of, you're going to draw it. So we kind of need support that's going to make them not just terrible to draw in those scenarios. So we will see. But going down the line into some generic support that I think could be interesting. Barrier Statue of the Inferno. Now, I don't expect... I mean, this deck uses its normal summon anyway, but I wanted to throw this out there. If you were to ask a Yu-Gi-Oh player, what's the most quintessential Pyro deck in the game? They might say, oh, I can't think of one. Or they might say, you know, Volcanics. I don't know if there's another deck anybody would ever say. And so I do think there is a world where maybe they just kind of come out of here and just make this a generic like Pyro deck. It can summon any Pyro monster out of the deck, but it hard locks you into fires or hard locks you into Pyro monsters, something like that. And now we just have a way to cheat out Barrier Statue of the Inferno, which, by the way, is one of the better statues. Water, wind, and fire definitely seem to be, like, by far the best ones, because those are just the least played attributes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Just something to keep in mind. Another one kind of in that same vein, Neo Flamvel Lady. This card's actually just good. It's actually not that old either. But it has a quick effect where you can send any fire monster from hand to grave to target a card in your opponent's grave and banish it. So it's just a DD Crow. And discards a fire, so, you know, discard Shell. Shell's gonna make up that value later on. Cool. And if a card is banished from the opponent's graveyard, which this card does, while you control this monster, you can send a fire monster with 200 or less defense from deck to graveyard. So depending on new support, we could even get more cards that want to be sent. This card would translate pretty well into that. Potentially, but, you know, probably uses normal summon. We already have Rocket, but we'll see. There could be a world where we're able to make use of this card. I'm not sure. Blaster, Dragon Rule of Infernos. I know this card is still banned, but I think everybody kind of agrees that if any of the 3 remaining Dragon Rulers could get unbanned, Blaster would be the first one. So if it does, this could be a card that kind of makes sense, you know? Gets Scattershot to grave, gets Shell to grave, gets them rotating their resources. Could be something. Spirit of Flames, this is when we're kind of getting thin on cards, because Spirit of Flames just banishes a fire from grave to summon himself, but if we're in a scenario where the support does kind of have a Link 1, and maybe this Link 1 doesn't even take Volcanics only, but maybe any Pyro, or even a Link 2, like, maybe we just need an actual good, like, extender that gets you a Pyro on field. So he could come up. I don't know. He's an old classic card. I remember using him when I was a kid. It's a cool card. And then you get to spells. Circle of the Fire Kings. This card pretty much destroys a fire monster on your field to summon one from grave. This, I believe, will trigger Rocket as long as it was the first card activated in the chain, which is pretty cool. So Rocket, this does just Reborn Rocket to get a Search for a Blaze Accelerator. It also gets stuff like Shell and or Scattershot out of the hand to trigger, to get them their shit going. It's a fine card. Again, it might be something that's a little bit more dependent on what we end up getting. Like maybe we get a new boss monster and this just being able to like, get him back from grave at times where he's been outed or something, and the deck just becomes get your boss monster up, keep him up, and he is good kind of thing, then this card could still be really relevant there. Ready Fusion. I threw this on here because we have not only Charubine the Fire Knight, but also Vermilion Sparrow, two separate pyro monsters, different levels, different stats, but depending on the scenario, like I said, if this archetype, if they just end up leaning into it and going, you know what, let's just make this the pyro deck. Let's give them like super generic pyro cards because there's so few pyro cards in the game. Maybe they get a Link monster, like I said, Link 1, Link 2 that takes any pyro, and this card becomes like a quintessential extender for the deck to just like get you into the Link 1/Link 2 for the deck. That could be something. I could see that being a thing. And I think that, oh yeah, and then Hita. You might as well play it. The deck makes it so easily. If Ash is popular, you can take Ashes, whatever, get up to a Unicorn. It's fine. You probably just play it. But whatever. So yeah, that's it. That's where we're at with Volcanics. Again, I think Link makes the most sense because of the way the archetype's already broken down. Maybe Fusion, like I said, if it's a contact Fusion, could just be the route anyway. But I'm curious to see where they go. I hope they're at least on somewhat rogue status. I could go to locals and feel like I could top if I have my deck built well, kind of thing. That's really all I'm looking for at the end of the day, and I think most people should be looking for, especially for support like this. But let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know if there's any cards I missed on here, whether it's a Volcanic card I somehow missed, or a just Fire/Pyro support card that could end up being something that comes up down the line. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, as well as just what kind of support you think makes the most sense for Konami to go about for the archetype, and so on and so forth. So I'm out of here. Sorry if this video ran a little longer than it was supposed to. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below. Subscribe if you have not yet and you want to see more stuff from your boy down the line. I know the content's been kind of dry lately. We're just in a weird spot in Yu-Gi-Oh! But the new set's going to be hype. Ban list hopefully in a couple of weeks should be hype. And we'll be in a really good spot to kind of pick things back up again. So yeah, just hang with me. We're on the way. Love you guys. Peace.